يا راغبا في كل علم نافع.
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن. هذه عقيدتنا الصحيحة فطرة تنفي الشكوك بواضح البرهان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Islamic Creed level 4, and continuing with the subject of Al-Karamat and related to the Wilaya or the Awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the righteous ones, that the people of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah approve the fact that they might experience some of the supernatural things that happens to them as a karama, as an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to them. And these people are the ones that are righteous, obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, unlike those who would show some of the supernatural things but that they are upon evil. They are the awliya, they are the people of the shayateen wal-'iyadhu billah. So this is something that is agreed upon, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives it to whoever He wills subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if someone that is righteous and obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and nothing of that happens to him, as the ulama they say that al-istiqama khayru min alfi karama, which means to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah is better than 1,000 karama or supernatural things. People seek to see or to witness something that is not the norm, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from them is to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah, and that by itself is a karama. It's the greatest honor for someone to be obedient to Allah and to be steadfast upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially at times of fitan and tribulations and so on. So to achieve that and to understand then what is the conditions for it. What are some of the conditions for the karama? First of all, it has to be something that is not natural, not normal. So something that is supernatural, as they call. Something related to a miraculous thing, even though the word al-mu'jiza is something that is unique to the messengers of Allah. So something not according to the norm of things, to the law that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreed to govern the life of the people on the face of earth. Again, something that is supernatural. The second condition is that it has to be done for a believer, someone that has the taqwa of Allah, the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, follower of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. Otherwise, it's not karama. Then it is not to be called karama. Karama means honor. So if it's someone that is upon sins or innovations in the deen, bid'ah and so on, it is not karama, it's something else. And some call it istidraj. Istidraj, which is mentioned in some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, that if you see someone that is upon disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sinful or committing innovations in the deen, deviated from the true path, and the more he does this, the more that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give him from materialistic benefits in this world, then know that this is called istidraj. Someone is being led into their own destruction without feeling it. Why? Because people would take this as an evidence that that person is righteous. They would take it as an evidence that they're upon what is right. And that has nothing to do with proof that the person is righteous or not, which is a very important point that we have to pay attention to. If people show something supernatural, someone flying in the air, does that mean that that person is upon al-haqq, the truth? The answer is no. So the shayateen, they can do these types of things. The evidences for something to be upon the truth is the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and that's what we're talking about. Someone that follows the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and if something like that happens, then this is karam. If not, then this is istidraj. A person is led to their own destruction or to the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The third condition is that this matter that is supernatural, it's something that can valid to be as a karama or an honor. So it is not in itself including a sin or something that is falsehood. Someone is aided to make a concert, for example, or someone is aided to do an act of sihr or sorcery or something of that nature. It has to be by itself something that is valid to be an honor, something of a good deed. There is, and this is what it leads us to get to know what's the difference between these karamat. So now we understand what's the word karama means, an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, versus these satanic ways that people would experience that can be also looks like a supernatural thing. So as mentioned, so not everything that is not according to the norm that it shows from or someone would experience is an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It can be a deception from the shaitan. And some of the jinn might do these types of things. So, and the way that a person would see the differences, and we talked about the book of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah rahimahullah, which is called Al-Furqan, the criteria to know the differences between the awliya of Ar-Rahman, those who are the loyal ones to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those who are close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, versus the loyal ones to the shayateen. So the karamat, for example, which is the plural of the karama, the reason why it happens, it's because a person is a true wali of Allah, someone that has al-iman and the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So anything that other than that is not to be looked at, it's to be overlooked. This is the ways of the shayateen. And we talked before about the statement of al-Imam al-Shafi'i rahimahullah. And this is very important so that a person is not deceived like some of the masses might, with things like that happens to them. He said, if you see the man walking on the water or flying in the air, فَلَا تَغْتَرُّوا بِهِ, do not be deceived by him. He's not upon anything unless you judge his actions and his affairs based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So this is something that is, again, as we heard, is an essential thing. So if someone is famous to be sinful or someone that is innovator in the deen, then that's not a karama whatsoever. So the same thing is that it is not permissible for someone that is upon righteousness that he believe that anything that happens to him is from these types of karamat or things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals to show how he's honored by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because this can be from the ways of shaitan. So if you think of yourself as someone that is following the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and something strange or something supernatural happened to you, you should, for your own sake, do not recognize this as this is something I'm receiving a karama from Allah, but what if it's from the ways of shaitan to deceive you? But rather you have to keep on being steadfast upon the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if a person finds himself in such a state, then he is grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to keep it hidden, as it's also one of the things to be mentioned. And Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah, he mentioned many of these things that people get deceived. Some of them would, as he mentioned, all kinds of interesting stories where, once he would, sometimes they deceive people, right? And nothing knows except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the reality of things. So this is based on sidq and truthfulness. Some people, they lie. They would have the statue, for example, of Maryam alayhi salam, and they would get some oil to come down from her eyes or something like this, and they would say she's crying, and the masses will surround and would say all kinds of things, thinking that this is a karama, when it's not the case. So it has to be based on truthfulness, because the shayateen, they do things, and people would lie to get some followers and things like this. So this is a gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And as for the other things, it's sometimes they learn it from the ways of the shayateen. And as mentioned, a person, if a righteous person, this happens to him, he would hide it and he would not look into it whatsoever. And the way of the shayateen is to be weakened by the recitation of the Quran and being obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala, and we continue with the next session with regards to warning against al-ghulu or extremism when it comes to the relationship between a person and the righteous ones. So till then, I leave you with the protection of Allah. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
يا راغبا في كل علم نافع
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية زاد،
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن. هذه عقيدتنا الصحيحة فطرة تنفي الشكوك بواضح البرهان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.